what's up? This is Marwan. I am near the Eternal Fire, and what I want to talk about today is how to split your day into chunks in order to be as productive as possible. So, what do I mean by chunks? So, chunks are essentially splitting your day into different parts. So, we call it a chunk because you're essentially putting a bunch of things that you would do in one category or into one chunk. And this is a concept that I learned from Tai Lopez, and it essentially allows you to be very productive. I know that there's a lot of different ways that you can do this, but this is just one way to do it, and it's something that I've been doing recently, and it's been helping me out a lot, so I think it's worth talking about. So what Tai Lopez talks about is splitting it into four chunks. So chunk number one would be maintenance mode. So essentially you're waking up in the morning, maybe eating something, maybe doing grocery shopping, going to the gym, and maybe meditating, maybe reading a book, and those type of things that essentially you're like going through that maintenance mode, taking a shower, like whatever it is that you want to do, that you usually do, have like a particular routine that you follow, and maybe even a strict time limit would be better, putting it under a strict time limit, and essentially like putting all that into like as part of chunk number one, which is maintenance mode. And this is what you would do when you wake up. So it's the first thing that you do. So chunk number two is when you first get to work. Now, chunk number two says that you should do the hardest thing in the beginning. So when you first get to work, the first thing you want to do is the hardest thing. And this was actually a huge thing for me when I first started out, because what I usually do is actually leave the hardest thing until the end. And I always felt like I ended up procrastinating. I ended up like not really finishing it. I'd put it until like the next day and only finish like half of it. So really doing it in the beginning of the day, like when I first start working, actually made a huge difference, and I'm like a lot more efficient and a lot more productive than before. So definitely something worth trying out just for that one thing alone. Like I think it's like worth trying out. Chunk number three. Chunk number three is essentially cruise control. So when I say cruise control, I don't mean just like cruising around. I mean, you're still working, you're still doing work, you're still being productive, you're still challenging yourself, but what you're doing is not as hard as what you would be doing in chunk number two. So an example for me would be chunk number two would be, for example, I do a lot of video reviews at work. So, and that's usually like the hardest thing that I do. And like I have to do a lot of camera angles, and video editing is a pain. So I would categorize that as chunk number two. Whereas chunk number three for me is more so about promoting our social media channels. So promoting my company's social media channels doesn't really take that much effort. It can be a little bit daunting to a certain extent, but it doesn't really take that much effort. So I would categorize it as something that would fall under cruise control. Now, chunk number four is assuming that you've done your work, and chunk number four is rewarding yourself. So the idea here is that you're pretty much rewarding yourself every day, assuming, of course, that you actually did your work. And Tai Lopez talks about this concept of constant gratification, and us as human beings, we always want that reward. We are always like kind of chasing it after that. Something that I could apply that to was actually a video game. So if you've never played it, it's fine, and it's a game called Call of Duty. It's quite popular. And the idea here is that when you first start out the multiplayer mode in the game, and because the developers are aware that, you know, not everyone's good at video games, not everyone can get sucked into video games as fast. So what they do is they apply their own version of this constant gratification system, where they're constantly rewarding you for even like the most mundane, the most little things that you're doing in the game. Like even if you're really bad and you're dying like 3 or 5 times in a row, like they'll even reward you for that. Like even if you like don't kill a dude but like damage him a little bit and then another guy kills him, you'll get like a reward for like an assisted kill. And it's like this constant reward that really keeps you hooked in the game. And especially like in the beginning when you're first trying it out and you're not really sure whether you're gonna like it or not, it actually ends up hooking you hard, and they're very good at that. Like that's what makes the game so popular. At least that's one of the reasons why it's so popular. something that you might be thinking of, well, you know, what I usually do is reward myself after I do a lot of work. For example, something that I did was after doing a lot of work for a certain amount of time, for a couple of months, I gave myself a big reward and I said, you know, let's go to San Francisco for a weekend. It's going to be awesome. And so I did that, and although that's good, like you should do that, that's actually helpful, that'll keep you motivated, and it's not very sustainable and in terms of getting you motivated on a day-to-day basis. Because if you're getting a small reward every single day, pretty much everything that you're doing will kind of like fall under that, right? So it's like you're doing it for the reward. You're like, even if you're having a shitty day, it's like, you know what, like at least at the end of the day, I'll get to like watch my TV show, watch that movie, read a book, play some video games, maybe go out with friends, and give yourself that little reward so that it kind of like gives you that, okay, you know, I did my work and here's the reward. So I find that like giving yourself a big reward after a couple of months is not really sustainable, and giving yourself more smaller rewards and like a big reward every now and then is much more sustainable. So that's pretty much what I talk about today. And just to wrap it up, the 4 chunks are: number 1, maintenance mode; number 2, doing the hardest thing of the day; number 3, cruise control; and number 4, the reward. That's all I want to talk about today. And on that note, until next time.